The King of Cool takes the stage. The control room hummed with a frantic low-level energy. Technicians, wires snaking from their headsets, darted across the floor, making last-minute adjustments to cameras and boom mics. Lights, hot and heavy, cast long shadows across the empty stage, where a single microphone stand waited, gleaming under the glare. The air, thick with the scent of hot metal and anticipation, vibrated with the promise of a live broadcast. This wasn't just another variety show, it was Dean Martin's first solo TV special, and the stakes, though invisible, were palpable. In his dressing room, far removed from the controlled chaos, Dean Martin leaned back in a plush chair, a cigarette smouldering lazily between his fingers. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo, the silk lapels catching the light with quiet elegance. His eyes, though shadowed by the soft glow of the vanity mirror, held a familiar twinkle. Brenda Sterling, his publicist, stood beside him, a perfectly pressed clipboard clutched in her hand, her brow subtly furrowed. "Everything's running on schedule, Dino," Brenda said, her voice a calm counterpoint to the distant studio din. "Just a few minutes to go. You good?" Dean took a slow drag from his cigarette, exhaling a plume of smoke that danced in the air before dissipating. He offered her a lopsided grin. "Good? Brenda, I'm always good. It's the audience I worry about. Hope they're good." He winked, a mischievous spark in his eyes. "Don't want them thinking I'm the only one having a good time." Brenda allowed herself a small knowing smile. She'd seen him like this 100 times, unflappable, utterly at ease, even with millions about to tune in. "You always make sure they do, Dean," she replied, her gaze lingering on his calm demeanour. "Just remember the cue for the senator's introduction. It's subtle, but important." Dean waved a dismissive hand. "Subtle, shuttle. I'll make it sing, don't you worry. Just make sure the bar's stocked after the show." A stagehand poked his head in. "Mr. Martin, 5 minutes!" Dean rose, unhurried, straightening his cuffs. He met Brenda's eye, a silent understanding passing between them. He valued her sharp mind, her unwavering loyalty. She, in turn, recognized the quiet strength that lay beneath his casual charm. "All right, kid," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Time to earn my keep." He strolled down the short corridor towards the stage, the muffled roar of the studio audience growing louder with each step. The stage manager gave him a thumbs up, a practiced gesture. Dean nodded, a slight, almost imperceptible tilt of his head. Then the velvet curtains swept open. The immediate burst of light was blinding, a dazzling white expanse. The roar of applause that followed was a physical force washing over him, embracing him. He paused for a moment, bathed in the warmth of the ovation, a genuine smile gracing his lips. He wasn't just walking onto a stage, he was entering his domain, the King of Cool ready to reign. He tipped his head slightly, a gesture of humble acknowledgement, before sauntering towards the waiting microphone, his easy grace belying the sheer magnitude of the moment. The show had begun. A song and a smile. The stage lights, a shimmering cascade of gold and sapphire, found Dean centre stage. A single, perfectly tuned guitar chord hung in the air, a velvet invitation. He leaned into the microphone, a familiar, easy grin spreading across his face, and the opening notes of "Everybody Loves Somebody" filled the studio. His voice, warm and rich like aged whiskey, caressed each lyric. It wasn't just singing, it was a conversation, a shared secret with every soul in the room. He swayed slightly, hands in his pockets, the very picture of nonchalant charm. The orchestra swelled, a tide of brass and strings supporting his effortless delivery. The camera panned across the packed studio audience, faces lit up, smiles wide, some mouthing the words along with him. An older couple in the third row swayed arm in arm, lost in the moment. A young woman, her eyes sparkling, dabbed at a tear. Dean's magnetism was a palpable force, pulling everyone into his orbit. He winked at the camera during the instrumental break, a playful gesture that transcended the screen and landed directly in the hearts of millions watching at home. The applause that followed the final note was a roaring crescendo, a testament to his enduring appeal. He took a bow, a deep, genuine dip of his head before mouthing a silent thank you to the band. As the cheers slowly subsided, the stage transformed, the orchestra receded, and a sleek modern set piece glided into place. Brenda Sterling, immaculate in a tailored sapphire suit, stepped into the newly configured spotlight. Her smile was professional, her posture impeccable. What a truly wonderful way to begin, wouldn't you agree? She addressed the audience, her voice smooth and articulate. A fresh wave of applause erupted. Dean Martin, ladies and gentlemen, never fails to deliver. She paused, letting the energy settle. Now, as you know, tonight is shaping up to be quite the evening. We have some truly exceptional guests lined up, some surprises in store, and a conversation that I believe you'll find most illuminating. Her gaze lingered on the audience, a subtle hint of anticipation in her eyes. But first, Dean will be joining us at the piano for a slightly more intimate moment. The camera cut to Dean, already seated at a grand piano, his fingers idly tracing the keys. He looked up, a quiet confidence in his expression. An unexpected guest. The applause for the preceding segment was still echoing faintly in the studio when Brenda Sterling, with her customary grace, stepped back to the podium. Her smile, though practiced, held a genuine warmth that always put guests at ease. And now, ladies and gentlemen, she announced, her voice a smooth current over the last ripples of enthusiasm, we have an unexpected, but certainly welcome addition to our evening. Please give a warm welcome to Senator Thaddeus Worthington III. Dean, who had been chatting amiably with a stagehand about the Yankees' chances this season, paused, a half-smile still playing on his lips. Unexpected? Brenda rarely used that word. He glanced towards the stage entrance. Thaddeus Worthington III. The name alone conjured images of perfectly tailored suits and carefully rehearsed gravitas. Dean had met the senator at various functions over the years, a handshake here, a brief cordial exchange there. Nothing to suggest a sudden, unannounced appearance on live television. Then, Senator Worthington emerged. He didn't stroll, he strode. His posture was ramrod straight, his jaw set, and his eyes, usually quick to crinkle with a politician's charm, were uncharacteristically devoid of warmth. They scanned the audience, then swept across the stage, landing briefly on Dean before moving on. There was a palpable shift in the studio's atmosphere, as if a sudden drop in temperature had occurred. The buzz of anticipation that usually accompanied a distinguished guest was replaced by a curious hush. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath. Brenda, ever the professional, extended a hand, her smile unwavering, though a flicker of curiosity, perhaps even concern, crossed her features. "Senator," she greeted, her voice a little softer than before, as if sensing the shift. Worthington merely offered a curt nod. His gaze already fixed on the centre of the stage, the spot where Dean usually held court. He bypassed Brenda's offered hand, moving directly to the microphone stand. The air grew thick, heavy with unspoken intent. Dean straightened, his casual posture replaced by an alert stillness. He watched the senator, a quiet observer of a scene that was rapidly unfolding into something far more serious than Brenda's polite introduction suggested. The studio lights, usually so inviting, seemed to intensify, casting stark shadows as the senator adjusted the microphone, his movements precise, almost theatrical. The only sound was the distant hum of the studio equipment, suddenly amplified in the unsettling silence. The accusation. The bright studio lights, usually a comforting warmth, felt suddenly harsh, almost accusatory. Dean, mid-anecdote about a particularly raucous night in Okinawa, was interrupted by a voice that boomed through the monitors, overriding the subdued applause. "Mr. Martin!" Senator Thaddeus Worthington III's voice vibrated with theatrical outrage, his perfectly coiffed head filling the split screen. "I find your continued jovial demeanour deeply troubling, especially given the gravity of recent reports. Reports, I might add, that depict a flagrant disrespect for the very men and women who sacrifice so much for this nation." Dean's smile faltered, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing his face before his features settled into that familiar, unreadable mask of affability. He tilted his head slightly, a gesture that usually preceded a witty retort, but his eyes, though held a new, cautious glint. Brenda Sterling, the show's host, shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her perfectly applied lipstick seeming to tighten with strain. She opened her mouth, a polite, "Senator, perhaps we should clarify," already forming, but Worthington barreled on, his voice gaining momentum. "Specifically, Mr. Martin, during your recent USO tour, my office has received, shall we say, numerous accounts detailing your alleged mocking of military protocols, your casual dismissal of their service, and frankly, a performance that many found to be utterly demeaning to the uniform." Worthington's chest seemed to swell with righteous indignation. "America, sir, is waiting for your apology." The words hung in the air, thick and leaden. The studio audience, previously chuckling along with Dean's story, had fallen into an unnerving blank. Dean, who had performed for countless troops in sweltering deserts and freezing outposts, who had shared countless laughs and tears with them, felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. His gaze, however, remained steady, unwavering. He simply stared at the senator on the monitor, a calm, almost serene expression, now replacing the initial surprise. Brenda tried again, her voice a little firmer this time. "Senator Worthington, I believe there may be a misunderstanding. Dean has always been a staunch supporter of our troops, dedicating countless hours to—" "A misunderstanding," Worthington scoffed, cutting her off with an imperious wave of his hand. "With all due respect, Ms. Sterling, when a United States Senator receives multiple, verifiable complaints about a public figure's conduct while representing this nation to its brave soldiers, I assure you it is no misunderstanding. It is a matter of profound concern and it demands accountability. Mr. Martin, do you deny these accusations?" Dean remained silent, his eyes still fixed on the senator. He didn't flinch, didn't stammer. The silence stretched, long and uncomfortable, amplifying the tension that now crackled in the studio. Brenda Sterling's hand, resting on her desk, clenched into a tight fist. She looked from the angry senator to Dean, her brow furrowed with a mixture of concern and growing frustration. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder with each passing second. America is waiting. The studio lights blazed, a searing, merciless glow. Brenda Sterling, usually a picture of poise, felt a bead of sweat trace a path along her hairline. "Senator," she began, her voice a cultivated balm, "I believe our discussion today centers on the upcoming legislative session, and perhaps Mr. Martin's recent philanthropic endeavors. Senator Thaddeus Worthington III, however, evinced no interest in bills or benevolence. His jaw was a hard line, his stare impaling Dean, who sat beside him, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. "With all due respect, Miss Sterling," Worthington boomed, his voice echoing a little too robustly through the soundstage. "There are weightier matters at hand, matters of national honour. Matters, I might add, for which America awaits a sincere apology." Brenda's professional smile faltered, a hairline crack appearing. "An apology for what, Senator?" she asked, a thread of tempered steel now woven into her tone. The live broadcast indicator pulsed scarlet, a silent, insistent sentinel to the millions captivated viewers. "For his disgraceful mockery of our brave servicemen and women," Worthington declared, leaning forward, conspiratorial, into the microphone, as if divulging a profound state secret. He entirely dismissed Brenda's flustered expression. "America expects your apology, Mr. Martin." Dean continued to regard the senator. His eyes, usually alight with humour, now held a steady, inscrutable depth. He offered no immediate rejoinder, only a slight inclination of his head. Brenda tried again, her hand subtly gesturing to the stage manager for a commercial break that clearly wasn't imminent. "Senator, Mr. Martin possesses a long and distinguished record of supporting our troops. He ridiculed them, Ms. Sterling," Worthington interjected, his voice escalating, a subtle vein throbbing at his temple. "He disparaged their sacrifice, and America clamours for your apology, Mr. Martin." The senator tapped a fist lightly on his chair's armrest, a theatrical flourish that rippled unease through the studio audience. A collective intake of breath, then a hushed murmur filled the air. Stagehands froze, their faces a tableau of shock. Even the cameramen seemed to suspend breathing, their lenses locked on the unfolding drama. Brenda's mind raced, desperate for an escape, a path to reclaim dominion over her own program. "Senator, I assure you Mr. Martin's devotion to the armed forces is beyond reproach. Perhaps if we allow him to speak—" "Allow him to speak?" Worthington scoffed, a sneer contorting his features. "He may speak when he offers the apology that America demands, Ms. Sterling. America demands your apology, Miss Martin." He jabbed a finger, thick and accusatory, directly at Dean. The subsequent silence was a tangible weight, stretching taut and thin, punctuated only by the low hum of the studio lights. 8 seconds, an eternity under the unforgiving gaze of the cameras. Dean remained unmoving, his composure absolute, his gaze unwavering. The 8 seconds. The digital clock on the studio wall, a silent red sentinel, ticked over to Dirioku 8. The air in the studio was thick, a humid blanket of anticipation and dread. Thaddeus Worthington Farrell III, his face a mask of self-righteous indignation, had just finished his fifth insistent demand for an apology, his voice resonating with an unearned moral authority. "America is waiting for your apology, Mr. Martin," he'd declared, his gaze fixed on the camera, not on Dean. Dean Dino Martin, however, was not looking at the camera. His steady, unblinking eyes were fixed squarely on the senator. A faint, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips, a mere ghost of amusement that only sharpened the senator's already flushed face. There was no fidgeting, no shifting of weight, no nervous cough. Dean was a statue carved from composure, his posture relaxed yet attentive, an island of calm in a sea of escalating tension. On millions of screens across the nation, families held their breath. The host, usually so quick with a quip or a redirect, was frozen, caught in the headlights of Worthington's relentless assault. The silence stretched, a vast, echoing chasm that swallowed the senator's bluster. It was the kind of silence that amplified the smallest sounds, a distant siren, a neighbour's television, the frantic beating of one's own heart. The clock clicked to Zuko 06. Worthington, unnerved by Dean's unwavering stare and the unexpected quiet, shifted in his seat, his polished shoes scuffing faintly on the studio floor. His carefully constructed facade of outrage began to crack, a hairline fracture appearing around his eyes. He opened his mouth, as if to speak, then closed it again, finding no words to fill the vacuum Dean had so expertly created. Dean's gaze remained unwavering, a quiet challenge in its depths. It wasn't aggressive, not hostile, but simply waiting for the silence to do its work, for the senator's bluster to deflate under the sheer weight of its own emptiness. The clock now read 00:03. The tension was a living thing crawling into living rooms, making dinner guests squirm, making popcorn go stale in forgotten bowls. Then at 00:00, Dean's lips parted. His voice, when it came, was a smooth, low murmur, cutting through the lingering echoes of the senator's accusations like a perfectly tuned instrument. It held no anger, no defensiveness, only a quiet, undeniable authority. "Senator," he began, his eyes still fixed on Worthington, "let's talk about visits. The quiet reckoning." The studio air, thick with unspoken expectation, pressed down like a physical weight. 40 million unseen eyes, a pre-show estimate, were fixed on the screen, eager for Dean to falter, to bluster, to offer a placating apology. Senator Worthington, a smug triumph etched on his face, settled deeper into his chair, confident in his ambush. His scathing accusations of mockery still vibrated in the soundproofed space, and he believed the advantage was squarely his. But Dean didn't bluster, nor did he so much as twitch. His gaze, steady and unwavering, met the senator's. Then a soft, almost conversational tone permeated the studio, slicing through the tension like a finely honed blade. "Senator," Dean began, his rich baritone utterly devoid of rancour, "you mentioned a specific USO performance. Perhaps that's our best starting point." Worthington, momentarily disarmed by the unexpected composure, stammered, The one in 61, I believe, Korea. You were flippant." Dean nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression gathering on his features. "Ah, Korea. Yes, October 17th, 1961, the 38th parallel. We entertained the 2nd Infantry Division. General Walker was present, if memory serves." As he spoke, the studio lights seemed to soften, and for a fleeting moment, the stark reality of the set receded. Dean was transported back. A makeshift stage, the biting Korean wind on his cheeks, the faces of young soldiers, weary but alight with nascent hope, gazing up at him. He recalled the easy jokes, the familiar songs, the communal laughter that for an hour had chased away the gnawing spectre of fear. He remembered the firm handshakes backstage, the whispered gratitude, the way a simple autograph could ignite a spark of joy in a face kept etched with the profound weariness of conflict. That tour also encompassed visits to the 121st Evacuation Hospital in Yeongdongpo, Dean continued, his voice still gentle, yet now imbued with a quiet authority that began to erode Worthington's self-satisfaction. And the 43rd Surgical Hospital. I vividly recall a young man named Private Miller, from Ohio who'd lost an arm, We sang Memories Are Made of This for him. He told me it was his mother's favourite. Worthington shifted uneasily, his air of smug assurance beginning to fray at the edges. He'd anticipated an emotional outburst, a defensive counterattack. Instead, he was met with a calm, methodical recounting of facts, each detail a quiet indictment of his manufactured outrage. Then there was Vietnam, of course, Dean went on, his eyes distant now, lost in the echoing chambers of remembrance. 65, 7, 69, 8 performances in Da Nang, 6 in Saigon. The hospitals there were particularly harrowing, the 93rd evac for instance. I spent an entire afternoon in the orthopaedic ward simply talking to the boys, listening to their stories. No cameras, no press. Just Dean Martin and a room full of genuine heroes. A flicker of unease crossed Worthington's face. He had expected to see Dean flustered, perhaps even humiliated. Instead, he was witnessing a man recounting a significant chapter of his life's work, a testament to dedication as undeniable as it was unexpected. The senator, who had never once set foot in a military hospital, found himself shrinking beneath the weight of Dean's understated integrity. The studio audience, initially hushed in anticipation of a fiery confrontation, now leaned forward, utterly captivated by the unfolding narrative. A story that painted a dramatically different portrait than the one Worthington had so meticulously crafted. The turning point. The tension in the studio was a palpable current, thick and suffocating. Dean had systematically dismantled the senator's carefully constructed accusations, each date, each location, each act of genuine service a hammer blow against the edifice of political opportunism. He spoke with a quiet power, his voice steady, the familiar baritone now laced with an unwavering conviction that silenced even the most vocal detractors. The host, previously a statue of stunned silence, now leaned forward, a flicker of bewildered admiration in his eyes. Dean paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the studio. He didn't glance at the cue cards or the audience. His gaze, cool and unwavering, locked directly onto Senator Thaddeus Worthington III. There was no anger in Dean's eyes, no malice, just a piercing clarity that seemed to strip away the senator's bluster, leaving him exposed. Then Dean delivered the question, not as an accusation, but as a simple, undeniable fact. "Senator, when's the last time you visited a military hospital?" The words hung in the air, echoing in the sudden, profound silence. Worthington, who had been preening moments before, visibly flinched. His carefully composed expression crumbled, replaced by a ghastly pallor. His mouth opened, then closed, a gurgling sound escaping his throat instead of the articulate defense he surely sought. His eyes darted nervously, searching for an escape, a lifeline, anything to pull him from the spotlight that now felt like an incinerator. He stammered, "Well, I have committees, you see, important legislative matters." His voice trailed off, thin and reedy, devoid of its usual booming authority. The sweat beaded on his forehead, catching the harsh glare of the studio lights. A single clap, sharp and clear, cut through the silence. Then another, and another, building rapidly into a thunderous eruption. The studio audience, previously held captive by the senator's pronouncements, now rose as one, a wave of cheers and applause washing over the set. Their shouts of approval were deafening, a roar of vindication for the man who had, with a single perfectly aimed question, deflated a self-important windbag. Worthington shrank in his seat, his face scarlet, his political career effectively ending not with a bang, but with the bewildered silence of a man caught utterly speechless. Dean, meanwhile, merely offered a small, almost imperceptible smile, a quiet acknowledgement of justice served. Grace and legacy. Across the nation, the airwaves crackled with a singular obsession, the Dean Martin moment. News outlets trumpeted headlines like "Worthington silenced by Dino's grace" and "A lesson in dignity, Martin humbles senator." The 8-second pause, endlessly replayed, became an instant cultural touchstone, a viral sensation long before the term existed. Brenda Sterling, observing the replays from her office, felt a surge of professional pride mingled with quiet satisfaction. Dean hadn't just navigated a political minefield, he'd transformed it into an impromptu victory parade. Senator Thaddeus Worthington III, conversely, found himself on the precipice of public disfavour. His re-election campaign, already listing, imploded with a disheartening finality. The carefully constructed facade of a defender of American values crumbled under the weight of widespread ridicule. His subsequent campaign addresses, a torrent of sputtering denials and indignant accusations against the liberal media, only amplified the public scorn. Focus groups characterized him as petty, disconnected, and a bully. The once articulate, commanding voice now sounded shrill and desperate. Even his staunchest supporters, those who had cheered his earlier grandstanding, recoiled from the joyless, relentless campaign. The November landslide was less an election outcome and more a public referendum on integrity, unequivocally finding Thaddeus Worthington III a deficient. Months later, the immediate sting had faded from the daily news cycle, replaced by the next fleeting sensation. Yet its resonance lingered in the collective consciousness. In a smoky Las Vegas showroom, the spotlight found Dean Martin, a martini glass glinting as he glided onto the stage, a wry smile playing on his lips. His voice, smooth as aged whiskey, enveloped the room. He crooned a familiar tune, his effortless charm washing over the audience. He joked, he winked, he sang, each note a testament to his enduring artistry. Not once, not even in a subtle aside, did he allude to the televised confrontation, the senator, or the viral clip that has defined a moment in American television. His performance was simply that, a performance. He embodied the very essence of moving on, of letting actions, not words, speak volumes. His legacy, already substantial, had been burnished to an unassailable shine, not by defending himself, but by simply being himself. The memory of his quiet strength, his unwavering calm in the face of a political ambush, became a silent hymn in the hearts of those who'd witnessed it, a testament to a different kind of power.